We are constantly being bombarded by problems that we face, and sometimes we can get completely overwhelmed. The story of the hummingbird is about this huge forest being consumed by a fire. All the animals in the forest come out and they are transfixed as they watch the forest burning, and they feel very overwhelmed, very powerless, except this little hummingbird. It says, I'm going to do something about the fire. So it flies to the nearest stream, takes a drop of water, and puts it on the fire and goes up and down, up and down, up and down, as fast as it can. In the meantime, all the other animals, much bigger animals like the elephant with a big trunk, could bring much more water. They are standing there helpless, and they are saying to the hummingbird, what do you think you can do? You're too little. This fire is too big. Your wings are too little. And you're big, so small. You can only bring a small drop of water at a time. But as they continue to discourage it, it turns to them without wasting any time and tells them, I am doing the best I can. And that, to me, is what all of us should do. We should always feel like a hummingbird. I may feel insignificant, but I certainly don't want to be like the animals watching as the planet goes down the drain. I will be a hummingbird. I will do the best I can.
Wow, what a powerful video. That was really inspiring. And I just wanted to add to it, if there are many hummingbirds, the effort is going to be great. Like all these droplets could turn into a big rain that it's going to put out this fire. My name is Mariana Pavlovska. I am chair of the Department of Geography and Environmental Sciences at Hunter College. And this week, we celebrate Geography Awareness Week, which is a national event. During this week, we go out of our way to increase the visibility and communicate the importance of geographic knowledge to students, to people, to everyone. And this knowledge is particularly important today, given all the challenges that we face in this world. Those challenges are environmental, climate emergency, pollution, and everything. Those challenges are also social. Inequalities are increasing, and there are many conflicts, and social hierarchies get on the way of achieving sustainable world. It's becoming very, very clear that we can't have a sustainable society that is green, but is unequal and unfair. So both challenges, social and environmental sustainability, go together. And events of our Geography Awareness Week illuminated different dimensions of this process very, very clearly. So let me just give you a little run-up. So on Monday, we had an amazing lecture by Dr. Celeste Winston, which was called The Geography of a Black World of Freedom. Then yesterday on Wednesday, we had an exceptionally busy day with lightning talks by faculty members about their research from GIS to Black Lives Matter research. Then we also had a student internship panel, students sharing experiences, research internships that they had in various organizations. And last night, we also had a lecture by Professor Charles Boris-Marty about green-gray path to global water security and sustainable infrastructure. And today, we have the last event of our Geography Awareness Week. And this event is put together by efforts of our students, faculty members, as well as students and faculty members from Pratt Institute, with many participants from outside of those two institutions as well. The event is called Climate Change Seminar Post-COP26, and it also addresses vital challenges in different dimensions of climate emergency that we are facing today. So I'm welcoming everyone, and I'm thanking everyone for coming and for participating. And right now, I would like to introduce Natalie Monterosa, who is our adjunct professor, as well as one of the presenters in this wonderful event. Natalie, over to you.
Thank you, Mariana. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We are very excited to present the Greenbelt Society Climate Change Seminar 2021. Our event today will take us on a journey to places like South Florida, Mexico, Israel, and back again to Brooklyn, New York. Speakers include students, college professors, and filmmakers who will all share their incredible work with us. Be a hummingbird. That was the message that Wangari Maathai, founder of the Greenbelt movement, wanted to share with the women of her native Kenya who were engaged in environmental conservation and human rights. Inspired by her vision, our group came together to form the Greenbelt Society about 3 years ago. In fact, our logo, designed and given to us as a gift by Linda Wakeman of the Elwha Clallam tribe, is a hummingbird representing harmony, wisdom, endurance, healing, and hope. Our mission is to educate, engage, and empower those who want to be a part of the solution to our current ecological and climate crises. We believe that all of us have a role to play in protecting and preserving nature through education and empowerment on a local scale. We have hosted several events over the years, including Earth Day, World Oceans Day, and much more. We engage in activities like coastal cleanups, hiking, walking tours throughout New York City, as you will see during this presentation, and encourage volunteerism and stewardship. If you're interested in learning more and becoming a member, please email us at greenbeltsociety1@gmail.com. Finally, I'd like to thank the Department of Geography and Environmental Science for their continued support, and to all of those who have participated with us in meetings, events, activities. We would like to express our sincere gratitude. And now I'd like to introduce one of our founding members and my dear friend, Professor Ramiro Campos, who will discuss more about our event and COP26. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you very much. Excellent words. I'm glad you said it, not myself, because I'm a jibber jabber sometimes. I do want to publicly thank you and Amy for doing a lot of the grunt work that doesn't get acknowledged to get everything done for the Greenbelt Society, and of course all the hard work you do for the students, for the department, etc. We all do thank you, and both of you. I just wanted to publicly thank you because it should be said as often as possible. Okay, so this is Geography Awareness Week, and we're going to discuss a little bit just a kind of world that goes post COP26 or beyond COP26, and some of the themes that am I sharing my screen? I'm not sharing my screen. Some of the themes that I want to discuss is how a geographical knowledge can help us understand the climate emergency and the solutions to the climate emergency. So what I'm one of the things I'd like to just briefly, always in my intro classes, is talk about something called the 5 themes of geography. And very briefly, I'm sorry to give everyone a a brief lesson into intro to geography here, but you're going to see that our presenters are each going to look at the climate emergency in using some of these perspectives here. So so location, it's the first question geographers asks, and we look at things like relative and absolute location, but it also involves scale, the global scale and local scale and micro scale. And some of our presenters from Pratt are going to talk about micro scale solutions to climate change. And this is where some of the most dynamic solutions to mitigating climate change are developing. Place is another important feature of geographical knowledge, and places are created by humans, we give them names, but these places also reflect our relationships with nature, which in turn reflect our relationships with each other. And one of my superstar students and one of Enrique's superstar students as well is going to do a presentation about relating to place. The human environment interactions really talk about the transformation of landscapes. It looks at economic development, climate change, species extinctions, but fundamentally, I want you to think about human environment interactions when Krause discusses the transformation of ecosystems. Movement and connections, really, we understand the world as interlinked, and we can use some ideas like supply chains, economic investments. We can look at colonialism, the spread of pandemics. And one of our presenters is going to discuss towards the end the global reach of financial institutions and corporations into every tiny corner of the planet, and how that is key to understanding the climate emergency and resolving the climate emergency. But ultimately, I want to really talk about regions. And there is a division of the world between the global north, those like ourselves here, developed post-industrial countries, and the global south. Those industrialized countries with very low levels of economic and human development. By human development, I mean access to healthcare, investments in public health by governments, access to education, especially for girls and women. And when we talk about regions, it's the impact that the global north has on the global south. And in fact, the people of the global south are the ones paying for the climate emergency right now, decades before the rest of the planet will. With these themes in mind, we ask ourselves what will become of our little blue planet now that COP26, which was announced as a turning point in humanity, has come and gone without a very definitive plan to meet the 2015 Paris Accords. Now, we're not here to come down on the UN. The UN is working at a very macro scale. What we mean here by post-COP26, at least one of the interpretations, is that what is it that we can do, everyday folk can do, because there are the big players that are trying to reduce global temperatures below or keep it at 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, all right? And this is important because, again, this is a little dated, but right now, if we keep up with the current policies, we're going to be at 6.3 degrees higher if we keep with the current policies. And so far, government pledges are not enough because our target is 1.5 degrees. And this is what the Paris Climate Change Accords, this is why it's so significant, because everybody went to Paris hoping for 2 degrees and they came out with 1.5. Significant, incredible work that was done at 2015. And 6 years later, we're still trying to understand what that means. What it really means is that every country has what we call the NDCs, nationally determined contributions to mitigation. So poor countries are expected to do a little less. Wealthy countries are expected to do more. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, and that will happen in the weeks and months to come. But again, what we want to talk about here is the small scale, the local efforts, because these are the big leaders with the big decision makers here. But I want to bring it back to what's happening at the local scale, what's happening on the ground, and the challenges we face, which are not just scientific and ecological, but they're also social. All right. So remember, 6.3 degrees. If we had a temperature that was 6.3 degrees above 98.6, we'd be in trouble. And that's how we need to think about the global greenhouse gas emissions. We are probably going to be in trouble because every ton of carbon dioxide that we pump out today, November 18, 2021, is going to be in the atmosphere atmosphere for at least 100 years. So we need to begin to curb those emissions now. And the reason this is a problem is because of dependence of coal on poor countries and other countries in the world, because it's the cheapest, easiest one to get. But it's also one of the most environmentally destructive economic activities, along with other types of extractive activities. So beyond looking at the climate science denial, we need to look past this. We need to not get sidetracked, and we need to focus on the level, right? We need to, I say, back up the scientists. So one of the approaches you're going to see is that I ask students to really look towards internships, right? And Nattapat is going to talk about that, and become citizen scientists. We need to push out there this idea of citizen science, because citizen science is what's going to save the planet. In other words, if you saw Endgame, and if you didn't, 21 movies led up to this one point where Captain America by himself is going to save the universe from total annihilation. And he thinks he's by himself. So these are the UN climate scientists. And the students and everyday people here, they're the ones that need to back up Captain America. Everyone has a small part to play together to mitigate the climate emergency. And I want to end a little bit with just think about what some of the things Wangari says. And I apologize if I get choked up, because she's Dr. Wangari. She was a PhD. Dr. Wangari was one of the most incredible sheroes that we can look towards when we feel anxious about climate change. She developed the Greenbelt movement, which helped mitigate climate change at a very local level in Kenya here. And this is literally the Green Belt. She reforested Kenya after having been away in the United States, getting her master's, and I forget exactly what it is. She comes back, she sees that there's both some social problems and environmental problems due to deforestation in Kenya, and she was able to help reforest Kenya using this idea of the Green Belt. And very beautifully, she says, I'm going to leave you with 3 quotes. You cannot protect the environment unless you empower people, you inform them, and you help them understand that these resources are their own and that they must protect them. The planet was robbed by us, by people by corporations who just wanted to think about the short term and not the long term. Luckily, corporations around the world are beginning to embrace something called the triple bottom line, or the 3 pillars of sustainability. It's not just about financial responsibility to your shareholders, but it's also social responsibility and environmental responsibility that corporations have. And this is part of the thinking behind COP26. But ultimately, again, it's about us. It's the little grassroots people that can change the world. And this is what she used to tell the women that she helped in Kenya. You don't need a diploma to plant a tree. Again, so please think about joining the Greenbelt Society. Please think about the kind of work that we're going to be doing. And please think about the 5 themes of geography as you engage with what the presenters are going to show us and inspire us with. So with that, I want to hand it over now to Laisa Sevilla, who is a pre-health environmental studies, not pre-health, pre-law environmental studies student, and knock it out of the park, Laisa.
Hi, all. As Ramiro said, I'm Laisa Sevilla. I'm an undergraduate student at Hunter College, and I'm going to start us off by discussing, and I'm going to share a PowerPoint, and I'm going to be discussing this coastal cleanup that we did, that I participated in along with the Greenbelt Society in October. Okay, so this coastal cleanup took place in Bayswater Skate Park, which I have a picture here. It's an area in Queens, and it is right next to Jamaica Bay, the estuary. And so on October 9th, a group of us, some of which are here, we went to this Bayswater Skate Park and just all grabbed garbage bags and together collectively worked to pick up any trash we saw. We went by the water, and also some of us went by the forest because we broke up into 2, and we just collected all of the trash that we saw. And while we collected trash, we also made sure to collect some data just so that we were aware of what we were collecting, what we could see. And then later on, I'll present some of the things that we found in majority. So some of the things, of course, we found like a lot of food wrappers, plastic bottles, garbage bags, and then also some things that were not expected. But overall, approximately 12 garbage bags were collected, each weighing about 20 pounds. And then a lot of things that we found were there was around 80 plus bottle caps, and then around 60 plus food wrappers, which included like candy, chips, etc., and around 63 beverage bottles. And we also found very random items such as like car engine parts, bike parts, and also fishing rod parts that were just thrown in the park randomly. And now, obviously, the importance is we're cleaning up a park, which is a part of our environment, and we should be taking care of it. But also, something that I realized upon arriving is when you entered the park, it was a beautiful park. There's not really much garbage around, but as you went deeper into the park is where you found all of this trash. So we went into like a foresty part, and that part isn't very visible, but there was garbage everywhere. Like no matter where you look, there was plastic, glass, everything broken, which obviously is a hazard for not only the people in the park, but all the animals, as they could ingest it or step on it by accident, and also can be hazardous if any toxins are around, which can then leach into the area and very toxic. And now another reason that it's important is it may seem like a minor thing to do where we just clean up the park, and some people will say there's no point because tomorrow more people are going to throw the trash there, so why even bother cleaning it up? And in my opinion, I think we can make a great difference. And as was stated in the video, the hummingbird said, I'm doing the best that I can, which is, I think, a mentality that we should all have, where while it may seem minor to somebody, to us, like we're helping the environment, which anything like picking up trash, even for an hour, 30 minutes, it's not minor. We're making a huge difference, and we're taking care of the planet, which takes care of us, and we're returning the favor as Ramiro stated, we're in a relationship with not only the planet, but ourselves. So it's important to not only take care of each other, but also the parks and environment. And I wanted to say thank you, and I think we'll have a Q&A at the end, so I'll save any questions towards the end. Thank you. But now, moving on, I'd like to introduce Alexander Krause, who will be presenting his film titled Sugar Water, The End of the Everglades.
Thank you, Laisa. Welcome, everybody. My name is Krause. I'm a researcher and filmmaker and a member of the Greenbelt Society. And for the last, hold on, I'm actually going to make sure I hit share sound. Okay, perfect. I've been working on this film for the last 2.5 years with my friend and colleague, Rick Jacques, who's the director of it, called Sugar Water, based in South Florida. And we've been investigating the end of the Everglades, which is one of the largest wetland ecosystems in the world. It's also currently the second largest national park by land area. And something everyone needs to understand about the Everglades is that originally everything south of Orlando was the Everglades. So you can see on this map here, Orlando's at the very top, and this entire watershed is part of the Everglades ecosystem. This is Everglades National Park, but all of this before human contact was the Everglades. And so we've obviously seen a significant development on the Everglades. You have Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. You have Fort Myers, Tampa Bay is up here. And basically what happened was they changed the natural flow of the water. So originally, all the water would fall in the Kissimmee Prairie, north of Lake Okeechobee, and it would flow downstream into the lake, which was a large reservoir that would overflow the south bank and flow down through the Everglades very slowly through what is now the national park into Florida Bay and Biscayne Bay. But what they decided to do is create a levee at the base of Lake Okeechobee and divert most of the water east and west through canals that they built. And it's actually the second largest canal system in the world after the Netherlands. So this is what the flow is like now. And so not only do you have a significant amount of changing the water direction, but you have a lot of pollutants as well. And so not enough water goes into the Everglades, and it doesn't replenish the aquifer fast enough. And it creates a huge amount of problems all around because the entire ecosystem is completely integrated via water. If you pollute in Orlando, it'll go all the way down to the coral reefs of the Florida Keys and everywhere else. So people think that there's one problem or another, but really there's a huge dimension of problems. So some of the major causes are the spraying of chemicals. They spray tons of chemicals to kill weeds on Lake Okeechobee and other canals around where people live because they decide that the weeds aren't beautiful to look at. They grow giant long lawns and that use an incredible amount of fertilizer, herbicides, and pesticides. That, of course, when the rain comes, and you know, South Florida has hurricanes and giant storms, washes all of those chemicals into the soil. There's a lot of impermeable surfaces now because of development. And so it flows right into the water table. The water table is very close to the surface, so it flows right into the watershed and goes all over the state because that's how the watershed works. There's a huge amount of cattle and farming, both sugar farming and cattle for slaughter, as well as some food farming, but there's a huge amount of land dedicated to sugar farming. Most sugar that you consume in the United States is grown in South Florida, south of Lake Okeechobee. If you see Florida crystals or domino sugar, that's all grown in Florida, in this region, which used to be the Everglades. And then, of course, we have the dredging of canals and rivers. So on the bottom right, there's this is the Kissimmee River. It used to be a long ox-boeing river, but they straightened it to make it faster to travel. It used to take 3 weeks for water to flow through this river, and it now takes about 3 days. And they've also killed all of the river grass that was in the river. So when it used to take a long time, it would filter out all of the nutrients, the nitrogen and the phosphorus from the farms and the residences in Orlando. Now it just goes straight into Lake Okeechobee, funneling huge amounts of pollutants all the way down. So here's the Kissimmee River into Lake Okeechobee. And then instead of it flowing here, they send it east and west. The effects of this are disastrous. We're talking complete ecosystem destruction. What used to be on the coast of Atlantic coast near Stuart, Florida, used to be the most biodiverse ecosystem in the world, and it is now completely decimated. They dredged the canal, and they killed all the sawgrass, or all of the river grass, which is where the base of the entire ecosystem, where sharks and tarpon and tuna and turtles and everything would lay their eggs. It's the core of the ecosystem, and they completely destroyed it. So you have blue-green algae blooms, which is when you have an excess of nitrogen and a good heat wave. You can get these blue-green algae blooms. They're freshwater, and when they hit it, when they hit salt water, they die, and they off-gas cyanobacteria. And the cyanobacteria and microcystin are both neurotoxins in the air, and they kill all the wildlife that's in the water. Here you have a dead manatee. There's also fecal coliform bacteria all around as well in the water. So people have lost legs from staph infections and sinus cavity infections and all of these things from having the water. We also have red tide. That's more common on the Gulf Coast. It's a natural occurrence, but it usually happens once or 2 weeks a year, and for a very small portion of the coast. And we've seen a couple times now in the last 10 years where you've had 6 months of red tides, and it kills all of the animals. It's a dinoflagellate. It's a natural organism, but with the amount of heat and the amount of nutrients that's being ejected into the salt water, it's increasing exponentially. You have reef deaths in the Florida Keys. There's a major scientist, Brian LaPointe, who's in the film, who says that this reef die-off is not because of bleaching, because of warming sea levels, it's because of excess nitrogen. And he traced a nitrogen isotope that they found on the reef all the way back through the watershed to Florida, to Orlando, that was the ingredient in Sweet and Low artificial sweetener. So I think we all know who consumes artificial sweetener. It's humans, it's not cattle, and it's not the sugar farmers pumping nutrients. It's, sorry, I lost my earpiece. Then we also have the drying of the Everglades. There have been significant improvements into restoring the Everglades. but those have come at a cost of hurting other ecosystems in exchange. So who's to blame? Is it the, here we go. Is it the sugar farming that's blocking the water flow, or is it the people polluting the water? It's a bit of both, but you're not going to solve this ecological issue by just sending more polluted water south through the Everglades. You have to clean up the water. You have to filter it effectively. And right now, South Florida Water Management District estimates they need $18 billion just to upgrade their current wastewater management practices to standardized level. And that's not even adjusting for the future population growth that Florida sees from now to 2030. So they need a lot of money to upgrade their systems, but I mean, this is completely unsustainable growth. And it's grown exponentially in the last 50 years. I think since 1960, they've seen over 20 million people move to Florida. This is just some of the characters we interviewed for the film. We have realtors, indigenous warriors. He calls himself a warrior. Captain, fishermen, iguana eradicators, old residents, sustainable farmers. So we got this data and this story from all these different characters. And then before, I'm going to show you a scene from the film, but before I do that, I just want to say if you have any questions or want any more info about the film, this is an immensely complex issue, and this is just the skimming of the surface of all of the issues involved here. You can find out more info by going to sugarwaterfilm.com, or you can email me at krause@luckylefty.pictures. And I'm going to go to this scene. It's about 4.5 minutes.
We're at a point now where they've just opened up the locks again, and they're discharging 500 cubic feet per second. That translates to about roughly 340 million gallons of water per day. This glyphosate from Roundup, the turbid water. Turbidity means the lack of ability of light to penetrate the water due to substance, floating particles. You're gonna have to hold on. Here we go, hold on. Because this guy's drunk out of his mind, and this is a big wake. I mean, that is arguably just inexcusable behavior right there. Just inexcusable. And I can look on the bridge and just know that they're just trashed. Just trashed. The entire Everglades agricultural area used to be the Everglades, i.e. it's Big Sugar is the main culprit, with a lot of ancillary, actually people that farm food, because we can agree that sugar is not food. All they are really farming is disease. And I mean that with the core of my being. So I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna walk on this beach here, we're gonna talk a little bit about mangroves, and I'm gonna go walking around over here and waiting a little bit, and I'll be screaming and yelling at the camera the whole time I'm doing it. We actually have some grass growing. This is this is awesome. This is absolutely fantastic, because I have not been here in a long time. But now, so let me creep through here. This is a fighting conch. It's a lovely little shell, and this guy is alive. He's just spectacular. Now, he doesn't get that big. He'll get maybe this big, Not, maybe like the palm of your hand. And you can see the little animal in there. And he's got a foot. You see this foot right here? That's his foot. And he wants back in the water. Look at that. This is spectacular. These are his eyes right there, and he wants back in the water. So we're going to put him home. Here you go, buddy. It's just sad, and I'm so glad we were able to find a few of these for this video, because it gives me hope. I know in a few months this water will be black, and we have to the lake has to get down. They mismanaged it. It's at 15 feet or plus. They want it down to 12. So they have to reduce Lake Okeechobee, which is over 1 million acres, by 3 feet, you know, by June. Now here's a classic example of something that really pisses me off. Somebody perched a mustard bottle. We're gonna have to segue into it. I'll give you that. This shit really annoys me. Somebody did this on purpose and they left it here. Why? Why? Leave the scene clean, you know? That's what they used to say at all the Grateful Dead concerts I used to go to. Leave the scene clean, man.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. When the temperature's right and the this is right and the that's right, boom, you get this algae bloom. And as it enters the salt water, it kills the algae and gives off these chemicals. And Florida Sportsman Magazine did some testing 2 years ago, I believe it was. They tested 70 individuals with nasal swabs. We're all pretty familiar with nasal swabs now, you know? So 70 out of 70 people tested positive for cyanobacteria and microcystin. That's 100% where I come from. Come on. So they're poisoning us on purpose. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You know what I'm saying? You just can't make it up. God, I've got so many words I'd like to say. Come on, man. Save it. We got to save it. It's just wrong to keep these discharges going. It's just wrong. Something has to be done. You know, something has to be done. I need to smoke a cigarette. I'm working myself up into a frenzy.
All right, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Greenbelt Society, Enrique, Ramiro, Natalie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Krause. That was a great video. Really enjoyed it. And next we're going to have my Kruvi, who will be presenting Wildfires and the Climate Crisis, the Case of Israel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mai. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the screen. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. Obviously, there's going to be technical difficulties. Hold on. Okay, wait. I should have done this before. Enrique, can you pull up my
I have
PDF?
it. I
Do you have it?
Yeah.
Because it's not letting me now for some reason share
Okay.
my screen without quitting.
Okay, so let me just do it and just tell me next slide. And
Okay.
then, okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
I
Okay.
think we're good. Okay. So we are going to be talking about wildfires and the climate crisis, and more specifically, the case of Israel. Next. So my studies concerning the phenomenon of wildfires began as an idea for a final research paper for one of Enrique's classes about a year ago. And I was like, you know, I was toying with the notion that there has to be some sort of a cyclical effect on the growing frequency of wildfires and like how that might affect the climate crisis itself, like, and then ending up exacerbating the problem even more, meaning more wildfires, more emission, carbon emissions, and a decreasing carbon capacity of forests, which then ultimately don't absorb as much carbon from the atmosphere, that then rises temperatures, that then, you know, here we are back again at wildfires. But, you know, as I was going through the research, and more specifically in Israel, the data sometimes highlights concepts that steer the narrative towards other perspectives. And yeah, so like I said, started off general, ended up in Israel, and more specifically, the wildfire in 2010 in Mount Carmel. Next. slide, please. Okay, so the ecological conditions of Mount Carmel are as such. So it's a mountainous crest on the Mediterranean coast of Israel, and like the northern section, and it's 18.6 miles long. Its elevation is 1,724 feet. The climate is described as Mediterranean. So that means that an average rainfall is 550 to 750 millimeters overall, but in the driest months, it's likely to be less than 30 millimeters altogether. 10% of the annual precipitation rates happen in the summer. But you know, this is a place where there's a lot of, it's a really big ecological community, sustains nearly 1,500 plant species. And then there's also plenty of animals that call it home as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so the fire itself happened December 2nd of 2010. It burned for 3 days and nights, laid waste to 6,250 acres of planted forest and Mediterranean woodland. What happened here is that all of like ecological conditions lined up to create the perfect firestorm. The summer was, that previous summer was the warmest on record. And then the following fall was the driest and warmest in 40 years. And they only received 0.1% of the expected annual rain, which is not much considering we just talked about how much the average is, and it's not a lot. But it's claimed the lives of 44 people, damaged thousands of homes, and annihilated a third of the Carmel forest. So it was really detrimental, and it's the biggest wildfire to date that happened in Israel. So that's kind of where my, research got to, and then from here it kind of expanded. But next slide, please. Okay, so the causes of this wildfire and generally, so like I said before, and I'm sure we've all noticed, that climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of climate-related natural disasters. It increases the frequency and intensity of heat waves, which allows for more ignition sources of wildfires. And it also accentuates the differences in land and sea temperature due to an increased difference in air pressure, which then what happens between land and sea, which is an issue for Mount Carmel, there's stronger winds that then fuel the fire even more. But like I said, an elongated period of droughts are likely to increase. And Mediterranean type forests do possess fire resilient tendencies, but frequent burning will eventually reduce the resiliency of these plants, even though they are, fires are, it's a natural occurrence, and it's oftentimes necessary. But once you abuse the land too much, there's a lot that can happen that we don't want. And which, even the most suitable plants to fire will not be able to succeed. And yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So here's a twist. Here's where things, like every environmental issue, it takes us to a different point. And this one is a political point. So in the case of Israel, there's a bigger problem that has to be addressed that I'm pretty sure we're all well aware of. So Khalil Adar is the director of the forest department in the northern region of Israel. Over there, it's more of like a private fund that, like instead of the Ministry of Forests or whatever, they have the KKL, which is also known as Jewish National Fund. But he is the director of the forest department, and I interviewed him last year for my thesis. And he claims that fires that are ignited in Israel are man-made, most likely arson, and they are fueled by the conflict. So now, not only are we dealing with climatic factors, we're also like dealing with, you know, the state of the environment, like resting in the hands of the conflict. In fact, in 2016, the Gala report found that 80 of the checked fires, out of 80 of the checked fires, 71 resulted from arson. And the problem is that those that ignite the fires are they're very well aware of what will create the perfect firestorm. Like, what are the conditions in which this fire will be most successful and be the most destructive? And that is a really big problem, especially as more opportunities arise for them to do that. Move on to the next slide. So the political root of the problem, it sits in the discrimination against Arab families that live either in Israel or West Bank or Gaza, but specifically, let's talk about the ones that are integrated in Israel. So Arab families account for most of the families living under the poverty line. Their towns and villages are also very heavily overrepresented in like the lowest socioeconomic rankings in Israel. And the Israeli state has consistently failed to take adequate and effective action. And the current underinvestment in Arab schools in Israel threatened to sustain the gaps between the two coexisting groups. We can't be setting people up for failure from the time they're kids, not allowing them to have access to information to then be able to become lawmakers and like be like well-educated voters and activists for their community. If you're not really allowing them to have any substantial schools. Like I said, lack of educational representation, and you know, social, but this is the problem that I'm having here. It's we can't put like social and political unrest at the expense of the environment. You know, I feel like that's just it's too much. But next slide, please. So now, like, you know, with all that said, let's see how that really affects the land. So natural regeneration efficiency is expected to decline. By the way, this is a photo here of Mount Carmel after the fire. So frequent fire events strain the natural regeneration of an ecosystem and slow the recovery process. Sites that undergo yearly fire events have had 60% fewer, around 60% fewer individual trees and 70% less basal area of like healthy forest. Frequent disturbances may not allow for even the better suited plants to flourish. Soil erosion and water repellency increases the more you burn, and then that also leads to landslides and runoff and, you know, a whole plethora of issues. But then we can also talk about health impacts for the people that breathe in the smoke surrounding, and with an increased incidence of asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, bronchitis, and pneumonia. So there's plenty of issues to choose from here. Next slide, please. So Israel has been up to date with the global standards of mitigation techniques of keeping the forest healthy and as fire resistant as possible. So those include animal grazing. There are, you know, like sheep and goats and other herbivores that do live in that forest, and they also shepherd them in as well. But you know, they've been planting more fire resilient tree species. They've been building forest roads and creating fire breaks, either by creating space or planting fire resilient plants or creating space between vegetation so that fire cannot completely jump across great lengths, removing pruned foliage that is likely to be ignited, organizing educational campaigns and fire spotting techniques. So maybe a fire can be, spotted way earlier. But the new Jewish National Fund sends firefighters, rangers, like they're the ones that come to action when a fire has been spotted. They bring the firefighters, they bring the equipment, they're the ones that are investing the money. Next slide. So solutions here. Slight adjustments to environmental techniques will be made appropriately, but drastic political strides must be taken in order to reach the root of the problem, through possibly and hopefully anti-discrimination legislation and increased enforcement, and enforcement on like Israel's side, as in they have to make sure that these programs that they set forth are actually in place and are actually working, because they've done this stuff before, but then they've been neglected and have gone nowhere. They need to come up with more strategies to raise public awareness of discrimination and of these said anti-discrimination laws, and of the rights of the victimized individuals. We have to humanize, everyone and make sure that we're aware of what's going on. But in order to increase political participation, Palestinians and Arab Israelis must be included in the decision and policy making. Their voice has to be heard, and they must have a hand in making these laws to make sure that they are represented. Of course, the root of the problem does stem much deeper, but on the surface, these issues can be easily addressed by Israeli authorities. But there has to be an open line of communication between leaders of these communities, and Israel must be established in order to ease the environmental impacts of arson. Next. So to conclude, environmental issues are obviously never easily solved, as they are multifaceted things. There's so many different things to consider. In this case, it's politics and a conflict, but other times it could be politics economically, oil companies, what have you, and money exchanges and all that stuff. So it's never just about the environment. There always has to be something else that really drives this issue forward. But in the case of Israel, the first step in addressing this problem is to relieve the tension caused by the decade, it says decade, but it should be like millennia almost, old conflict. And as social unrest commences, the likelihood of arson increases. The blame is not to be placed solely on Israel's behalf, as these acts of arson can be considered environmental crimes. But there is something to be said about finding a compromise for the sake, not only peace, but the place that each side claims to be their homeland. If we can't be destroying the place that everyone's fighting over, that's the point is kind of moot. But addressing issues revolving around precipitation rates and rising temperatures and everything that comes along with the climate crisis are key to the wellness of the ecosystem and is of dire importance, but these efforts will be outweighed by the danger arson poses. And I believe that is it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Mai, for your presentation. It was amazing. And just to quickly mention, after our next group, we will be having a 5 to 10 minute break. Just a heads up. But next we have Jason Vigneri-Beane, Rafael de Balanzó, and Enrique Lanz presenting Imagining Pratt Institute as an Ecosystem.
Okay, good afternoon or good evening or good morning to everybody here in this, I don't know how can I call this, cloud or whatever is this. Thank you very much for inviting us here to this wonderful presentation. in front of my name, I would like to put Dr. Rafael de Balanzó and Jason Vigneri from Queen's College and Pratt Institute, respectively. This idea or this project started to be in our minds, I am going to say more than 1 year ago, correct? Because I don't know if you are very familiar with the history of Pratt Institute. Pratt Institute was founded by Charles Pratt. He had one of the largest oil refineries here in Brooklyn, in the area of Greenpoint. And this is something fascinating because he is part of the story, I am going to say, of climate change from the 1800s and also the ecological crisis. The company, the Astral company, bought by the Standard Oil Company from the Rockefeller family. In other words, Pratt company was integrated there in the Standard Oil Company, but not only that. The Astral company from Pratt contributed to one of the largest oil spills in history that happened, as you know, in Newtown Creek, Greenpoint. In other words, this is a really fascinating point of view, correct? But our main idea for this project started approximately, I am going to say the main expansion in September 1st, 2021. Please, Jason, next slide. Now, I am totally sure that you were very familiar with September 1st, or I am going to refresh your mind. We had a record in precipitation. I mean, those 2 weeks were unprecedented. We had a record of precipitation 2 weeks before September 1st. In other words, in 2 weeks in a row, we have 2 records of our precipitation. If you see there in the left side in this blue cylinder, between 8 and 9 o'clock in the afternoon, evening, September 1st, 3.24 inches of precipitation fell in New York City. That was a record that broke a record 2 weeks before. Now, if you see now in the right top side, you can see that it was calculated at approximately 42 billion gallons. I mean, if you are used to liters, multiply by 4 approximately. In other words, you are going to get an astronomical number. And the area of New York City is around 302 square miles. It means if you are doing the multiplication, you are able to get 42 billion gallons of rain. And obviously someone can say, okay, Enrique, and who cares about this? Check the red color. New York City is prepared for approximately 3.8 billion of gallons per hour. In other words, if you think about this, you can make the multiplication there. Several times more rain than the capacity of the city to absorb that. And I think that moment was absolutely crucial to start to think about, we need to do something here from a local perspective, from a campus. Is it possible to transform a campus into an ecosystem to reduce the flood risk, not only of the campus, but also of the local community around? And what about the heat vulnerability? That moment was, I am going to say, like a climax, I am going to say, to expand our idea of or our goals to transform Pratt in a type of ecosystem. Now I am going to introduce you to Dr. Rafael de Balanzó, who is going to continue with the supra scale of this idea. Go ahead, please, Dr. de Balanzó.
Thank you, Enrique. When we were analyzing this project, we had a first question that is, imagine that how Pratt campus could be an ecosystem hub adapted to the current climate crisis. We have seen that fires or any kind of crisis, disruption, change are terrible for our ecosystem, but also crises are a necessary step for evolution. Then any kind of system has to evaluate, and you could see in the image that if we are analyzing a campus community such as the Pratt Institute community, there is plenty of different systems, ecological systems, socio-economic system, and technological system. And all these systems are interrelated and confronted to many changes in the different scales and different systems. Then we have to understand the complexity of our habitats, of our communities. Next slide. All of these changes are also interrelated. And for all of this complexity, what we try to implement with the Pratt Institute and my colleagues Enrique and Jason is a methodology to understand the complexity of the community of Pratt in front of change. Next slide, please. The methodology that we have implemented, the methodology to analyze all of these vulnerabilities and risks that has the systems, the different scale systems, spatial and social, ecological and technological. And we were launching a participatory mapping process and analysis, quantitative analysis of all the different issues from energy, water, material, community, infrastructure, etc., buildings. And with all of this analysis and mapping process, we would like in the future to launch a campus ecosystem climate action plan following the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And also at the same time, we would like to implement actions from bottom-up process and also top-down institutions. Then our goal is to, in the future, launch this process of climate action plan. And we will see with Jason and Enrique in the following slides how we started with heat wave and rainwater systems changes.
Hi, everyone. I teach at Pratt, so I'm just going to give a quick little, kind of snapshot sense of what Pratt is as a kind of physical environment. As Enrique said, Pratt was founded by Charles Pratt. This was in 1887, and it was to offer education to the community. And it could be converted to a factory if it didn't succeed as a school. So if you ever visit, at least we're talking about, the Brooklyn campus of Pratt, you start to notice that it sort of looks like a factory masquerading as a school, or a school masquerading as a factory. You find industrial smokestacks, traces of steam plants and other kind of industrial architectural moments. But this is a 25-acre campus in Clinton Hill, and along with its kind of early community education mission, it currently serves as a kind of, at least pre-pandemic, and hopefully this will come back when things open up, soon, I hope. It's a kind of, campus has sort of public park and sculpture garden as well, with two public entrances. But it is also fenced off from the community around it as well. And this idea of the perimeter and the fence will also sort of figure into some of the things and ideas that came out of our workshop. that we'll talk about in a minute. But here you can just sort of, quickly see a, the most kind of diagrammatic of, of campus plans to just get a sense of how much open area there is, right? The total campus area is, is about 975,000 square feet, and about 250,000 square feet of that is building roofs. And there, probably the, on this diagram, the left half of the campus, where you see numbers 1 and 2, that's more the kind of classic urban campus quad, right? That's, that has most of the sculpture garden, rose gardens, landscaping, lots of trees, planting, lots of shading. And then the right half of the campus starts to become a bit more back of house with parking lots, loading docks, all the kind of garbage collection facilities, storage, these kinds of things. And it was, reminding me a little bit of something I think Lisa was saying earlier in her presentation about, the front of the park is clean, and the back or the invisible areas aren't so well maintained. And I think you can sort of see that in some of the lower photographs, 5 and 6, where this is kind of like really beautiful, kind of front of campus. And then the farther you get towards what feels like the back of campus, the more of a kind of, zone of parking lots and sort of waste management it becomes. But I think the thing is just one of the last things I'll try to quickly say before passing the baton again is that what seems like the back of the campus is actually an interface with of course a whole living neighborhood, right? With with housing, churches, there's a police station, businesses, and so forth. So I think this will become a kind of a site of interest as we move on later in the presentation. So, okay, I hope that helped to just give a quick orientation for those who haven't been to Pratt. And I turn it back over to Enrique.
Thank you very much, Jason. And it is interesting because most of you don't know Pratt, but know the campus of Hunter College, correct? Totally different. In other words, the Hunter College is a real urban campus, almost asphaltic and concrete campus, very different than the Pratt campus. And why I say that is because of this data that it is in front of us here. And I try to put this, or the amount of precipitation that we receive in September 1st, the record in precipitation in this city, connected to the geographical qualities I am going to say of the Pratt campus. If you put these 3.24 inches of rain in 1 hour in the volume of the campus, you are able to imagine that it's a massive amount of water. We calculated approximately if you see there, you are talking about in the 6 digits of gallons. Millions of gallons fell just in that surface in Brooklyn in approximately 1 hour. Now, this is very important because we are talking about an area that it is very green. Think about Hunter College, where practically the 98% of the surface is concrete and asphalt. In other words, try to make these comparisons, please. Jason, next slide, please. Now, there is another interesting thing about heat vulnerability. As you know very well, we have the urban heat island effect. In other words, the temperature inside the city is warmer than outside the city, correct? And now because of global warming, obviously this effect is becoming more intense. But what is the geographical context of Pratt Institute? Can you see both maps in both sides, left and side? Pratt Institute is located approximately in the middle of both rectangles. And if you see there the colors, Pratt is located in a fascinating area, very radical transition. if you see there in the left side, approximately in the rectangle, Pratt is located in this type of brown color, correct? Is the Clinton Hill area. But if you go to the right side, Williamsburg and Bed-Stuy, very intense red color. In other words, the vulnerability, the heat vulnerability is very high. Now, this is very important for our project. Is it possible that Pratt can expand some type of adaptations in terms of green spaces to reduce the heat vulnerability, especially for communities that are absolutely very poor, going east from Pratt Institute, working class or low working class, even with the gentrification for sure that it is happening there. But what can we do, you know, in the reduction of heat vulnerability? Please, Jason, go ahead, please. Now, we started to meditate about, okay, why we don't do an interactive workshop? What people think about our project? And this is what we did approximately 2 weeks ago. We put together in through Zoom, like today, using a program called Miro. Perhaps some of you are not familiar with this program. It's like a type of digital virtual whiteboard where everybody can participate and put in photos or commentaries. We had approximately 25 people and we divided the people in 5 groups and they had an individual conversation there. And after that, we have a discussion about that. Go ahead, please, Jason. We raised several questions. What type of ecological structures are you able to think? How you are imagining Pratt as a type of ecological hub to reduce the flood risk and the heat vulnerability? And people started to think about individually and in groups about some type of solutions. Go ahead, please, Jason. And these are just very brief samples about how people integrated their unbelievable ideas. And this is a really, I think, opportunity that we can apply even in Hunter College. Is it possible to create a virtual, I am going to say, event talking about sustainability? You can see here how there is a marvelous potential. Now I am going to leave again with Jason Vigneri, that he is going to continue illuminating us with some final conclusions for the Pratt campus. Go ahead, Jason.
All right, thanks. Hey, again, everyone, hi. So, you know, this was the first round of brainstorming and workshopping, you know, really in a sort of, you know, kind of more bottom-up sense with, you know, students and faculty and, you know, some participating administrators in this workshop. So just, you know, we'll take a few minutes and a few slides to just think out loud about some of the things that emerged in the discussion. You know, I thought it was interesting that, you know, the brainstorming started out probably more on a kind of an architectural and material level. And then it slowly became, you know, slowly but surely became more systemic and more, I think, you know, ecological. You know, let's say it started to change and look inward towards curricular opportunities on campus, and also begin to think more outward in terms of community engagement. So anyway, you know, there's lots to do and lots more sessions to have, but just, you know, the kind of initial flickering stages, you know, had to do with, you know, on a material and sort of architectural level, you know, thinking about, you know, skins and surfaces, you know, which sort of makes sense, right? Kind of in the first level, it's sort of just, you know, what everyone sees, you know, when they come to campus, you know, so there were, you know, lots of early ideas, you know, about kind of, you know, scuppers, you know, white roof membranes instead of black roof membranes, you know, to deal with heat, you know, heat absorption. You know, replacing, you know, asphalt with, you know, grass paving, you know, replacing, you know, kind of, you know, toxic sort of, you know, sinking, you know, materials like, you know, kind of roofing materials like tar and, you know, EPDM, you know, membranes, you know, with, with vegetation. So in a way, people are sort of like focusing at the beginning on the surfaces and skins of building and surfaces and skins of the ground, basically, the kind of landscape surface. I just have a sort of, a few simple diagrams here as, visual prompts, to start to think about how, how the brainstorming changed, into things that were more systemic. So let's say, having to do with water, and, here are a couple of, quick sort of, 3D views of ground and roof based on some of the rainfall numbers, if you imagine them as volumes, that Enrique was mentioning. So participants in the workshop, begin to think about, networks of pools and water plazas, almost, like, kind of campus as, sort of, river delta, with dry wells to store water that could, water the landscape, right? Because we have a lot of, landscaping resources in play on campus to, start to, do things with sort of, toilet flushing, to start to think about, water, water storage and distribution as a way of campus irrigation, right? Getting into ideas of, some of the open space on campus being used to sort of grow our own, food, for the health of the students. We start to get into the curriculum. I think, kind of water and irrigation, prompted some of the students and faculty, to think about, how to use the campus, as a kind of a farm, for the materials that we use in courses. So people in the fashion program, thinking about gardens to grow plants, for fibers, for natural dyes, right? Cutting down shipping, cutting down, consumption, being much more renewable, and being able to basically, have students in courses see how, let's say the clothing that they're making, first begins as a kind of a planting project, and then a harvesting project, and then a kind of a transformational, processing project, thinking about, growing, growing vegetation to make our own bioplastics and biofoams, that are sustainable, that are, renewable and recyclable, thinking about, also water use, or water sort of catchment and harvesting and filtration for things like casting, mixing paints, cleaning. So, could go on and on and on, but it really sort of opened up, a lot of ideas about the resources that we use in, in our kind of curricula being, being a kind of a high production, art and architecture and design school, right? That sort of makes a lot of things. Also, getting there, close to wrapping up, but also thinking about the perimeter, right? So this is annual rainfall. Let's say, kind of on campus, gets about sort of average of, 46.5 inches. And I think you can see in the diagram a little bit more of the volume, right? The kind of extrusion of those shapes is 46.5 inches of water, right? So you can see, the difference between just a kind of a ground surface and a ground volume, or a roof surface and a water volume. But campus would get about 28 million gallons of water in a year, and where I was talking about the campus fence in this sort of problem of the perimeter, separating the community instead of connecting in the community. We've also been starting to look at ideas of, just brainstorming about what would happen if you took down the campus fence and replaced it with a sort of a 10-foot wide little sort of ecological strip, right? And so, so basically, if the campus perimeter is 4,132 feet, that 10-foot wide strip would become an area of 41,320 square feet, and at the annual rainfall, right, that becomes almost 1.2 million gallons of water, right, just in this kind of buffer zone around the fence, and one could start to imagine what that could become, and in terms of.
I'm so sorry, Jason. If you, can you wrap up in 15 seconds?
I'm finishing. In terms of composting, in terms of wetlands. So no fence, but a little ecological zone, and then just the finally, the very, very fast thing is that of course people are thinking
wrap up
solar. Solar, and creating energy to give back to the community. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jason, Rafael, and Enrique. Now we're going to be taking a very quick 5-minute break, and we're going to be showing a quick video of a conversation that was held last Saturday about my island's ghost forest. So in Enrique's class, we took a trip to visit this exhibit, and we had a conversation while there. So during the 5-minute break, we will be showing that video. So hope you all enjoy.
Hi, good morning. We are here, we are a group of people composed by students from Hunter College, CUNY, and also Pratt Institute. And we are sponsored and supported by our group, the Greenbelt Society. I know that we are reading in the description that this is a ghost forest, that ecologically speaking is a forest that it is dead, mainly because the sea level is rising and desalinization is killing, obviously, this type of forest ecosystem. Yeah. When we are thinking about a forest, we are thinking, most of the people living in the cities, they are thinking about just trees in a garden. I cut the trees and they are going to be demolished. But when you are in a forest, you can see how the trees are dead there around you. And I think this could be a marvelous opportunity to demonstrate that, yes, what is the meaning of life? They are really dead or they are not dead? It is very easy to say that they are dead, but what is the meaning of death and life, especially under this connotation of climate change?
It feels kind of eerie, like the trees, they're all like empty. Feels kind of like empty in here.
We said it was pretty spooky. Something could just come around the corner. Most of these trees died from, I think, salt. So it's not really something you think about as a poison, and it's not really something that you can physically see. Like we were talking about how, we talk about forest fires and stuff like that, and it's kind of like a silent fire happened here. Like you can't see the burn marks or anything, but these trees still died.
I also feel a bit weird too, because I almost feel like it's like a colonialism. I see like scars and dead bodies displaying this public space. It's ready for exhibition, so I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable, but yet I think it's a really interesting exhibition to experience.
It kind of feels like a graveyard. I think when I think about climate change and the actual effects it's having on our environment and what it can have in the future, it's it feels very dystopian, and everything just goes on like it's normal, even though there's it is a crisis. It's happening.
Seeing them now, how they're all dried up and just in the middle of a very busy neighborhood where we see a lot of cars and people just constantly walking by. And I think we even walked by trash where somebody just left their Starbucks next to it. It's kind of sad that people don't really take in nature. I think for the most part, they don't really come here to enjoy it. They just, or they will, but they don't really see the tree as living, and now it's dead, but they never
Especially
really,
in this exhibit, to leave your Starbucks drink here. Yeah. It's definitely worse.
Kind of shows how people treat nature in a sense. They don't really care to protect it nor take care of it, which is really sad and disheartening.
But seeing living organisms such as these dead doesn't as I said earlier, bring an easy feeling, especially because as an engineer, I wouldn't want technology to bring disasters such as these. I would want more so technology to actually prevent and upkeep what should have been, a good scenery or greenery.
Why did? When you are in a forest, there are trees like this, but why everybody is characterizing this type of, I don't know how can I call these living organisms now, dead?
I'll be honest, it took me a little while to realize that these were not fake trees because the wood inside, it seemed like the artificial wood that you buy in the store, and I was like, this doesn't seem like it's real, and then it's real. So that's why I think that is a good adjective for describing these trees that are as far as they seem like they're fake, they don't have any life to them anymore.
And it's especially sad because living organisms such as trees are known to last hundreds of years. And it's upsetting to know that organisms such as humans are starting to actually outlive trees because of the damages and the death provided upon these trees.
In a forest, all is connected. All the trees are connected through their roots and their, and they talk to each other, but here it seems that maybe they're feeling the impact too. So it's not just us. It's really quite sad, actually. I didn't think I would feel this way coming here because I've passed it so many times and I never really was thinking about it that way. But now that I'm standing in the middle of it, to think about the future being this way, and very soon. We're not talking 100 years from now. We're talking, 10, 20 years perhaps.
So that was our video, and of course I'd like to thank Krause for directing and putting that video together. Thank you very much for filming that. And now we will move on to our next presenter. But before that, just because we are running a little low on time, please try to keep your presentations 8 to 10 minutes maximum, just so that we do have time for the Q&A at the very end. But next we will have Nattapat Karmniyanont. So sorry if I mispronounced that, but he will be presenting a taste of Mote.
Totally okay. I get that a lot. So I will share my screen. So what I'm gonna show today is a taste of Mote. Mote Marine Laboratory is where I was given the great honor of interning this past summer. So what Mote Marine Laboratory is, as it sounds, it is a place where people come in and research marine biology and things like that. They're offering opportunities for undergraduates, graduate students, anyone who have interest in marine biology to come and kind of research. They're offering paid positions to anyone that are able to get into their slightly competitive curriculum, or I guess group. So there are a lot of different types of groups that you can go on to, but they offer programs in ocean technology and marine biochemistry, plankton ecology, ocean acidification, turtle conservation, much more. What I was able to get into is marine mammal and sea turtle stranding investigations. This is our kind of the layout of the ground. I mainly worked here in the Marine Mammal Research and Rehabilitation Center, although with my internship, we didn't really do too much rehabilitation. We'll get to that a bit later. But yeah, so stranding investigation program. When people hear the word stranding, a lot of things come to mind, like abandoned animals, maybe something left behind, which is kind of what we stranding investigators do. We respond to what we call stranding events, which are any events that a sea creature might be in that they need help. For example, a sea turtle might be entangled in some fishing wire, or a dolphin might be entangled in some fishing wire. But most of the time we respond to kind of calls about deceased animals where since it's Florida, of course, people go to the beach a lot, and then we respond to those animals by grabbing, kind of removing them from the process. But we'll get to all the death later. I will show you. We'll get progressively more upsetting pictures, and I will give you a warning when we're already gonna get into the nitty gritty of it. Okay, so first we have here a baby, a calf, a manatee calf. We were called in by a family who was building a house in the area, and they noticed that this calf was alone in their pier. So they called, after about a week of this manatee being there, they decided to call it in. So after calling it in, we determined that this young calf was alone, which is strange since the mother manatee would usually stay with them until a little bit later, but this one was alone. So then we decided to accept this call and investigate the area, meaning we go on site. After arriving there, we decided that we needed to move her to a safer location because that area have a lot of boats around, and being a calf alone in that situation is not ideal. So what we ended up doing was connecting with SeaWorld, who, since Mote doesn't really do a manatee, since we don't have the facilities for it, we usually transfer it to other more capable organizations. So what we ended up doing was taking this little manatee here to SeaWorld. So during all that time, it took us about an hour to get to SeaWorld. So imagine having this ball of muscle in a back of a van, trying to make sure she keeps breathing, because as you might guess, this is a very stressful situation for the animal. And what they often do is they would hold their breath, and we can't have that. So what we do is we gently lift her head up above water, as you see here. Between maybe every 1 minute or 2 minutes, if she doesn't breathe on her own, we will help. But unfortunately, she started breathing on her own closer to the end of the ride, so that gave us confidence that she would do okay. At the moment, she is in SeaWorld right now with other manatees that she would do relatively well. So it's very nice. She's there now. She's doing all right. So next we have a nested. We were called with a nesting turtle in the morning, which is strange since sea turtles usually, or we hope, would be nesting at night, since that's how they stay away from predators. But this one happens to be during the day. So we were called, and then we decided to go and make sure no one was messing with it, just in case, because we know people, and people mess with wildlife all the time. Okay, so this was actually a very nice kind of experience, since this was about our second week in, and for all that week we experienced nothing but dead turtles, necropsies, things like that. So it was very nice seeing an actual living sea turtle for about a week in. So we see the sea turtle covering her nest, getting ready to go back to sea. So we can see that this is a loggerhead sea turtle, by the way. So, and then she finally gets back to the ocean. So a good thing about this situation is, keep us in line with how things are supposed to be. And not every turtle we see is gonna die. So it's kind of give it a little bit of hope, or to keep going on. So with the nature of stranding events can happen 24/7, so anytime during the day. And we tend to respond to call between 9 and 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. just to keep it so that we only work during the daytime, and things like that. But this time we decided, some of us went out with some sea turtle conservation workers to what we call turtle tagging. So turtle tagging is when we when female sea turtle come into nest, we want to make sure that they are marked, they are tagged, and taken measurements. So this time we worked until 5 a.m. in the morning. So from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. So it was very nice to work with that. The fun thing about this experience was we actually got very good at determining what tracks turtles make in the middle of the night with all the help with the moonlight. So we can see that green sea turtles will make this kind of like parallel line motion going through because they kind of like fly. They flip both of their pectoral, front flippers up, causing this kind of like parallel ridge. However, a loggerhead would kind of like army crawl around, causing this kind of like zigzaggy pattern. So that was very fun to do, especially at 5 a.m. So this time we were actually get called onto a group of stranded manatees. So there was 3 manatees that got stranded during a mating herd. So mating herd would happen with manatees where one female is surrounded by sometimes 50, sometimes 20 males trying to mate. And sometimes the female would, in order to get away from that situation, would go to sea, go to the shore, and then sometimes they get stuck. And of course, this time we had to come in and help because they were not going to get out. This is an important moment for us as interns because we kind of like working with everyone here, Mote staff, FWC officers, and especially the members of public, because of course, no one person can move hundreds of pounds of manatees. And then going on to talk about red tide, as Krause was talking about earlier. During my internship, we also experienced red tide, especially around August, or earlier August, when things really start picking up. During this time, we usually get about 20 calls, maybe sometimes hundreds of calls, and more turtles were getting washed up. More and more calls were getting picked. What's worse about these red tide events is the effect on the wildlife. This little baby manatee sea turtles here, one of our coworkers found it as we were picking up a dead sea turtles. Actually, he notices it as it was amongst the dead fish and things. We don't know how he noticed it, but he noticed it, and then it was able to make a full recovery when we brought it back to our hospital. So this is actually showing a effect of red tide. Sterling here, she's a Kemp Ridgely turtle. We got called that a turtle was swimming weirdly not being able to swim back out of shore. So we responded to the call, especially during this time. And this here, we can see the effect of red tide on sea turtles, having neurological effects on them. As you can see, little head spasms of the turtle, showing why they can't really swim too well if they get intoxicated by red tide by eating infected grass, things like that. So around this time, and sometime we see she would get really bad episodes of kind of like striking all over the place, it's very dangerous for us and the animal at the same time. But it also not affect only sea turtles, it's also affect manatees. Unlike sea turtles, manatees tend to get more lethargic, so they move less, they kind of like float in one area, and they have face twitches. Don't let the smiles fool you. We were very tired at this time, moving this sea turtle again to seaward, manatee to seaward. All right, so this is a little upsetting to show, but this is showing the nature of stranding events where you never know what's going to happen. But we were called out to this kind of like middle of nowhere area where they're saying they think that someone hurt the manatee. So of course we decided to come and check it out. What we found was this little manatee right here, this little calf with its mother. The calf, as you can see, have red spots all over. We're not sure why it has that, or what happened, but it later became we suppose that it was birthing trauma, or it was born like this. So we see here the calf having issues swimming around, trying to get air. So the mother had to try and lift up the calf to get air, but it wasn't doing very well, as we can see. This is a video of the calf trying to swim. The calf, we can see that it can't swim very well either. So we decided to call FWC to help bring in one of their big boats, because we need to transfer both the calf and the mother to keep them together. Yeah, the mother was huge. She was over 1,500 pounds. It took a lot of people, and she nearly capsized the boat, which was a sight to see, but we were able to recover her and transfer both of them safely to SeaWorld. But unfortunately, the calf died in SeaWorld. It wasn't anything we can do, but we were able to transfer the mother back to where she was found. So at least there's some good thing. All right, so then in Mote, we also do what is a final project. The final project that I did was because it was a new situation, so you can do a research project with a whole paper and poster. Some of the program requires you to do that. My program did not, so instead I opted to create like a map of the area of our necropsy lab in order to help new interns coming in to get their bearings, to know where things are, so they would be able to help with more efficiently with the job that is required. So they have more time to focus on their own research rather than trying to learn where everything is. Let's say. So I also included things to do before leaving the lab, such as cleaning your hands, checking all the supplies, things like that, turning off the lights, simple things. But my friend, she did her project on how the COVID situation affect numbers of or HI, or human interaction of sea turtles. What she found was that due to COVID, more people is actually going out to sea on boats, because of course you can't do anything else except go on boats, supposedly. And she noticed that this is high spike in the percent of HI found between the time of COVID compared to the rest of I think she started her data off at 1990s or 1980s. All right. So now it's the warning time. I will show you what we do when we recover a sea turtle. Now, this is the technical aspect. So if you do not want to see, I recommend turning away, closing this slide. Okay, we should start. So first, when we recover a sea turtle, we give them this ID. So ST21058 is the number of sea turtle that year. So ST sea turtle 21 representing the year, 58 representing the turtle, the number of turtle that year, or well, this particular number of turtles. So this was the 58th turtle. We ended by the end of my internship, we got to about 80 something turtles. So it was about 40 turtles that we found. So we would take a front picture. We would take it oblique, so from the side. We would take the plastron, so the underneath, and then the carapace, so the overhead. We would also take the left and the right side, and then we would also identify any noticeable damage that might be representative of boat strikes or any other abnormalities that we can find. So this one, very clearly boat strike, propellers perhaps. We can see this very sharp straight line showing that it's probably a propeller that did this, although we can't say what killed the turtle per se, because it might be injured or hurt before, although yeah, it gets into little details like that. This was ST21050, our first turtles actually that we got called out on. So this one you can see very clearly a bolt strike right through the midline of the body. After this, this turtle was a male. We can tell that by the length of its tail. So males have longer tails, tends to have longer tails, I should say. And then the strange things about this turtle is, if you see the picture on your right, you will see these deep gashes on the carapace itself. So we know that this turtle was hit by at least by a boat at least two other times. So we can see this one scar here, and another scar here. So we can.
I'm sorry, Nattapat. This is not Game of Thrones. It's a little gory. So
yeah, no, this is the last one.
If you could wrap it up, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, this is the last one. So that's it. So if any one of you are interested in joining an internship over the summer, I highly recommend Mote internship. Yeah, that's it. You can go to mote.org. Yeah. So I guess I'll toss it on to the next person, which is Christina.
Thank you. Let me get my presentation going up. So this is not my first slide, hold on. Okay, so I am a film student here at Hunter College. I'm not a science major or anything, so my information is a little more basic than what everyone else has been doing, but so I'm currently in the middle of working on a documentary about the fast fashion industry and its impact on the environment. This is just a working title right now because I don't have anything better, but all right, so I'm probably not gonna read the whole thing, but this is just basically a summary of what my film is about, that I really want to focus on stores like H&M, Forever 21, and then have an online aspect like with Shein, and to show through interview footage and time-lapse footage that I'm going to be taking on the sales floor of how often fast fashion changes throughout like the weeks, the months, and the year. So what I've been doing is I've been going to Times Square every so often to film with the sales floors, seeing how often that they're changing their stuff out. And then I have a shoot plan for Black Friday where I want to see how the prices jump down and how quickly things sell out. I also am focusing on what happens after people buy things, as in thrift shopping and landfills, like what happens to clothes after people buy them, because most people seem to think that thrifting is a solution, which it is better, but I've noticed that there are problems with thrifting now because of gentrification around it, so I'm going to be focusing on that as well. Let's see, hello. I guess this is just a little explanation, not by me, of what fast fashion is. My computer's running very slow today, so that's an issue, but.
Can you describe it? It was the interview, right? With the.
This is not the interview,
worker.
this is not really 100% necessary.
Oh, okay.
So I can skip that, but I will get to the interview. So basically, these are just small little clips I took of billboards at Times Square. I kind of took it for two reasons. Basically, that there is obviously a little bit of hypocrisy going through with these billboards, that they're talking about like climate activism, yet it takes so many resources to run a billboard. And obviously there's the counter argument that you're reaching more people when you have this, but it's still quite ironic to me. And so these are from H&M, which is in our opinion, examples of greenwashing. Yeah, I'm gonna cut the volume, it's not important. But these are examples of greenwashing to me because they're showing that H&M cares about recycling and cares about the environment, but they're really one of the worst offenders in the fashion industry in terms of exploiting their workers, in terms of how much they're pushing out. And I do have an interview with someone who worked at H&M discussing the hypocrisy of their conscious line. So then these are also some other billboards at Times Square talking about the climate pledge right here. And then this one here talks about like how these stores are doing more to like change to more eco-friendly ways. Again, seeing to every company use wind, solar, or both, which even if companies are doing that, that's only a portion of how like detrimental fast fashion is to the environment, which I do talk about later, the actual science behind it. So yeah, this is what I have from an interview with someone who works at H&M, who used to work there. And she's talking about how often the sales floor gets changed out. I hope this loads because this is important to me. Change out the sales floors.
They changed definitely at least once a month, if not sometimes more often. The whole store didn't change all at once, so like men's would change like at a certain time, and then women's would change, and then kids, so it was all like revolving. But like I would come into work one day and just had just finished learning the layout and then had to relearn it again because they changed it.
Okay, so everything's changing around often. So what happened once those clothes were pulled off the floor?
They would go into backlog, which was like back in the storage room, but there wasn't like a lot of backlog, so I don't know what they do with the rest of it. Like I know they kept some of it, but I don't know what happened to the rest.
So at that point, do you think that they throw their clothes out?
I would say yeah, probably.
Or it goes on sale?
It goes on sale, and the backlog stuff is what goes on the sale racks, but I don't know what happens to the stuff that like doesn't get sold.
All right, so in case you didn't hear my questions, because this is raw and unedited, so my questions haven't been like typed out and put on the screen yet. I asked her about how often H&M changed out their sales floor, and I asked her if she thought H&M threw out their clothes, and she said yes, because there was a lack of information around the staff where they were kind of kept in the dark about what happened to their clothes after they left the sales floor. And in later part of the interview, she talks about H&M's conscious program and how neither her or her colleagues actually knew what the program did, where it's pushed out like these customers are doing really good for the environment by bringing these clothes in. She's like, I have no idea. She worked there and she had no idea what the program was, and she wasn't told by management what the program actually did. And this is a 15-minute interview that I'm going to include in my documentary, where she also goes on to talk about that they would get a shipment once a day of hundreds of boxes of stuff and containers, and she said that it was constantly just like filtered through, and it would take all day to go through these shipments, and that's how often. So I have this clip here that to me just kind of stresses the prices, like that this is Forever 21, already really cheap clothes, and then you have constant sales going on, which makes it more desirable to the consumer to buy these cheap things. When I was talking to my film professor today that a lot of these things are cheaper than a cup of coffee is. So if you can easily get that, it's more desirable. So this is where I talked about the thrifting solution. Well, obviously it's obviously better to thrift because there's not as much in the process of it, because I think in my next slide, I talk about how much like water goes into making something, and you bypass that by buying thrifting. But as you can see in this, this pair of jeans right here is $95, and this is a used pair of jeans. So there is a massive problem with the gentrification of thrifting, where people online are doing these like big thrift videos. And I was talking to someone where they mentioned there was a thrifting convention last year, which completely defeats the purpose of like the actual purpose of thrifting. Like you have these rich people just going into thrift stores, so you get things like this where the prices end up being more than you would be paying for fast fashion. So it's less desirable to the consumer to be going to a thrift store when you're paying $95 for a pair of jeans. You can just go to get Forever 21 to get a new pair of something. Also, the fast fashion is ending up in these thrift stores. Like this is an example, kind of hard to see because again, it's unedited, but this is a ripped skirt that went to a thrift store. So you have these really, and it's $20, and you have a poor quality item now going into these thrift stores because the poor quality of fast fashion is being processed through thrifting. So I made this little timeline of like the actual resources that are going into it. So in the beginning, when you're making clothes, the fast fashion industry contributes 20% of water waste. It takes, I believe I have a statistic where it takes around 700 gallons of water to create one t-shirt. So there's so much water waste just being created for one item. So then obviously a lot of plastics that there's also an issue a lot of animal rights activists have with fake leather, that obviously neither one is sustainable because like fake leather, 64% of all fabrics is made out of plastic. So when you're washing that, which I have right here, when you're washing that plastic, it's going into the water system. So it's constantly creating a new issue now that it's not just like one issue for fast fashion. It contributes to so many different things. I have right here that the average American buys 68 fashion items per year, which is believable because in my interview that I have with my friend Layla, who works at H&M, she said that people would come in and buy around 10 garments per transaction. And that is insane about the giant gap with social media has created, that people used to buy clothing when they needed it, when they worn out, but now with trends constantly changing and people on social media pushing new outfits, the average American feels pressured to buy more than they need, which is creating all of this waste. Well, also the fashion industry produces 2,100,000 tons of carbon emissions per year. And part of that is the fact that these industries, a lot of American clothing isn't made in America, it's made in Bangladesh and China, which already has a problem of labor exploitation because these people are working massive hours for little pay and poor working conditions. But then you have to get that clothing over here, whether that be on planes or boats, that's taking up tons of carbon emissions. And also with the fact that fast fashion is that it's fast, so you're pushing that out. So constantly you're having shipments going over, and that's a massive problem for waste. So then last one, because this is where the life cycle of clothing ends, is that Americans throw away 70 pounds of clothing a year, and 80% of that clothing ends up in landfill. So a major problem that I have with thrifting that I'm going to continue to explore in this documentary is that people get these clothing because they can't use it all. They're consuming more than they can realistically use. They bring it to thrift stores, and now thrift stores are being filled with these clothes that they don't have room for. They'll still try to turn people away, but a lot of times they take more than they can, and then that stuff that should be in the thrift stores is now going into landfills. So it's absolutely ridiculous how much is going there. So again, I'm not a science major, but I'm definitely going to be talking to people in the science industry. I have more interviews lined up to talk about what's going on with these landfills, like how much is going into landfill and how we can stop that. Is thrifting really the better solution, and how can we stop these wastes? Because there is that issue with pricing. It's definitely not so, also is an environmental issue, but it's also a social issue because these people that are buying fast fashion, there are the poor side of the spectrum they will take these poor items and they will treasure them. But then there's also people online who are like famous YouTubers and they have tons of money and they're being like $900 Shein hauls, and that's a huge problem. And a lot of people are doing that, and that is one of the #1 contributors to the fast fashion industry. And this documentary is in its infancy, but I am very excited to explore that. But thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And now we will move on to Carlos, Mariana, Saul, and Janet, who will be presenting Talla de Madera Sustentables.
I'd just like to interject here for a second. I know that we're out of time. It's 7 p.m. now, but this presentation is being recorded, and we will try to post it up to our website. So if you have to leave, it's okay. It'll be available on our website if you want to watch the rest of the presentation. And again, thank you to all the speakers.
And they're very good presentations. So please, I would ask you to stay just a little longer.
Thank you, Natalie. So, well, let's start with a presentation. Now I'm sharing my screen. Okay, hope you're seeing it. Thank you, Janet is part of our team. So can you see the presentation, Janet, so you can start?
Yes, I can see it. Okay, guys, we are a multidisciplinary team. This project is located in Oaxaca. The multidisciplinary team is, we are base designers, artisans, and biologists, yeah? And maybe if any of you geography or biogeography wants to join us, you're welcome. Our project is about sustainable wood carvings. And can you pass the next slide, please, Carlos?
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna keep moving in the meantime. Like I was saying, our project is located in Oaxaca. Oaxaca, it's a state in Mexico. It is one of the poorest states in the country, but it's the richer one in terms of biodiversity, yeah? The tree that we are working is called a bursera. It's part of the family of burseras. This is one that's the Bursera grandiflora. It has been used for so long time in Central America. Since the indigenous communities were located here, Carlos is gonna let you know more about how it was used. And it has been a lot of research in the last 20 years about this tree because it has been used for a production of this handcraft that is new on the market that is called alebrijes. Since then, people from different backgrounds in America and in Europe have been trying to understand how the tree is growing, the number of trees around the areas. You can find different scientific resources about it. Next slide, please, Carlos.
Here it goes.
Thank you. It's not moving.
Maybe it's late, but there, it's already changed on my computer.
Okay, don't worry. Well, here it is. Here you can see the tree, how it is. It is not like a very large tree. Sometimes people can see it like more like a bush, but it is not a bush too, because it has the characteristic, the biological characteristics to be defined like a tree. Well, this tree, it has like 104 species in between the North America and South America, and 80 of these species are located in Mexico, okay? Well, the next slide, Carlos is gonna let you know more about what is the project, basically. It's your turn, Carlos.
Thank you. So if you're seeing the new slide, we are talking about the use of the bursera tree, of the copal wood. Not only the tree itself is useful for the wood, but it's also used for because of the resin that it is used as it's used, no, and it's used mainly for cosmetics, also perfumes, for soaps, and as well it was used in our ancestral times for rituals. And in nowadays, it turned also in part of a supply for all the handcrafts that are made. These kind of handcrafts are starting by the little coffins made of wood, and then with the perfume of the linaloe or the pulsera, it's part of the enchantment of this craft. And the most recent craft that has been developed in Oaxaca for now more than 30 years, it's these card figures that have been that started as just animals with not finishes, and now they're being having decorations that are really nice and now growing and going out more. And this is part of the nice thing of Oaxaca, no? So what is this alebrije? This is a carved figure out of copal. The copal is a really smooth wood that you can carve, as you can see, just with a knife and a machete. You do the big cuts, and then the knife, you can do the carving. So it has colorful patterns, and of course it is it's worked easily. But it started being used in many communities, and 5 or 7 communities here in Oaxaca. And then it started being exploited, not only from the area where these communities are, but also starting to be, because they've run out of it, and they're starting being produced and being caught in other places, not directly by the artisans, but by other people, what they call coyotes or suppliers, that are not exactly people that run with all the permits. Basically, what happens now is that after these years, there are no legal woods in the market, no, and basically no legal woods, and also woods that don't have a forest management progress or program having valid, or not even having a permit to cut the wood. So technically, all the alebrijes that are produced in Oaxaca are basically illegal, no? And our challenges, Janet will tell you a little bit more about the project challenges. Your mic, Janet.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Like I was saying, most of alebrijes are made of copal, not all of them, but the artisans, they really like this kind of wood because it's very soft and easily to manage. And every time that we have been trying to work with them different kind of wood, the problem is that they face an issue with the material. The other woods are very hard, and they are not like a noble good that they call it, yeah. And well, we noticed that all these artisans are in a very good idea about the tree. It's going out of the environment, and they really are trying to do something. But it's very curious. The tree is not very easily to grow. It's a little bit delicate, not in terms of it is a very hard tree, and once that it grow in a very dry environment, it grow fantastic. But it's not easily to plant it, yeah. And well, we also offer to the artisans a different kind of the options. And what we notice is they need other kind of tools. More of them are using the traditional kind of tools that are not the best to work with all these new woods. Well, the next part of our project, it's gonna talk about the restoration and reforestation. I don't know if you want to go into that, Carlos?
Okay, so that's the soul of our project. Since the woods that are being used, the copals, come from dry lands, we are here in Oaxaca, one of the leading managed forest worldwide that is owned by forest communities, by indigenous communities. This is, they are also certified by FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council. That interesting, it was founded here in Oaxaca in 1994. And now it has grown worldwide, and now it's a fourth certification scheme that is worldwide recognized. And now, well, now their world offices are in Bonn in Germany, but still there's the headquarters for memberships are here in Oaxaca. So the project started trying to use other woods, template forests that are already certified and are part of indigenous communities. But we are now also in a side avenue trying to promoting the restoration of the Copal certification, the Copal areas. That is a different type of forest, different type of vegetation. So part of this project, we managed to have, we're piloting this first plantation of 700 around trees of Copal, and we're looking now forward to do the plantation and do the follow-up. But at the same time, the idea is to put up a project of people that are interested in being the guardians to adopt these trees and help them grow until they turn into craft. So this would be an interesting thing to see how can it evolve, together with the other part of the certified alebrijes that are being now developed with other types of wood. And so that's bringing us to the reforestation of these trees, and these are the effects that happen. And Janet will let you know a little bit more.
Yes, one of the things that is very important to notice here is in the state of Oaxaca, a little bit more than 90% of the land belongs to the indigenous communities, which means that they have the power to decide what to do or what not to do. The rest is a private property. It looks like a very nice thing, but maybe it is not, because when you want to invest, you want to own sometimes. But in this case, we're trying to arrange with the communities, to talk with them directly, how we can start using this land to plant all these trees. We have been talking about, even, it's very curious, the green belt around different communities. We have been talking about the green paths, because around Oaxaca, there are different things that you can do thanks to the environment. But half of our work is organization. And when we're working with the communities, we notice nobody wants to pay the organization. Everybody wants to arrive and see everything in the right place. And well, we want to invite you, all of you, to join us in this adventure. We have been pleased hearing all of your work, and by saying our experience, Carlos has a lot of experience, I do too, working with all these things, environmental things. It is hard, we can do a lot of things. And the first video that you guys put about this African history with the colibri, that I read it some years ago in the Nelson Mandela book about African child histories, it's really something that we, all of us, can do. Let's become a colibri. Thank you,
hummingbird.
guys. Yes,
thank you.
I'm sorry, but I am talking the Spanish thing.
So, well, this is part of the idea. This is a project, and finally, these are the first 4 persons that we started, and we bonded together. Mariana, she's an academic from the university, has made several studies about Copal. Saúl Arreón, he's an amazing craft that started an initiative of ecological eco-alebrijes. Myself, that I've been working for more than 20 years around communities and sustainable management and certification and several forest schemes. And Janet Cordova, that has been working from New York and now also here in Mexico and Oaxaca for years. Well, she's from Oaxaca, you have to know, and now she's living in New York. And from there, she's been working a lot with artisans and Friends of Oaxaca Folk Art, NGOs, and so on. So we're putting up an interesting team that would be delighted to put together and work with other people around. And if there's time, we can just show a fast video. It's in Spanish though, but it would be interesting for you to see what we are also doing.
I'm sorry, Carlos, there's no time, but this was great.
Okay.
But I'm sorry to interrupt. I do want to say that the thing about the hummingbird, it's a Japanese fable that was towed in a public setting by a Kenyan woman, and now it's moved to Mexico. You know, I think it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. Yeah, it's some interesting. At some point that you might have known, they just had two huge alebrijes designed here in Oaxaca, and they showed them, and they were exhibited in the Rockefeller Center.
Mm-hmm.
Now they are in the United Nations, and they are really amazing jaguars with feathers. Those are made basically with copal, and sadly, the wood made of those are illegal. It's an illegal wood. No, even it's an amazing work. There's things that have to be done for the supplies. No, just as it happens with the clothes, with all these things that you've shared to us. We would be happy to see things go back to the end.
That two pieces of alebrije are like this thing, like it's a fiberglass, but the original ones, it looks like they were made of real wood. And yes, and they cover it with the fiberglass, but the ones that are in New York right now, they are fiberglass made.
Fiberglass.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos and Janet. And next we have Robert Lundell, I'm so sorry, who will be presenting the value of what's not there, or the Internet of Things saves the planet.
Hi, thank you very much, you guys. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, great, super. Well, yeah, let me start out with a little video. Since I'm a filmmaker, this is about a minute long, and I want to show you where this conversation all began. I'm having a hard time looking through chat here, but oh, there it is. Very good. And this is video, and I'll have to share my screen, so please bear with me. Okay, looking good. And then screen share. How do we do this? And I'll go ahead and show you this. This is the beginning of a film that I made where I grew up. And I was raised in Southern California, which is a consumer society. It's very media driven. And I went to the desert to find a place where I had been as a young person, as a young student. And to my surprise, I found that what I had recalled about the beauty and harmony of the area was under threat. And it also became a very important story about environmental justice, because there have always been indigenous people in this part of the desert who have long been marginalized, and in some cases pursued and fought against, and so on. So it's you'll find in this little video the introduction to a longer story, and I'll tell you how this relates to COP26. Lots of snowbirds in Southern California by train.
You're not sharing your screen, Robert.
Okay, hang on. Sorry, guys. Not sharing my screen. Is this me? Oh, there, wait. Sorry, I haven't done this before, guys. Okay. Oh, come on.
You're muted somehow. Hey, Robert, can you turn on the?
I'm sorry?
You were muted somehow. There
I
was
was
no sound.
muted.
Yeah.
Am I not muted anymore?
Now you're not muted. Yes.
And you can hear the video, right?
Hopefully.
Okay.
You've really done in the entirety of this.
I had first been brought to the desert by my father and mother, members of the greatest generation, attempting to heal from the horror of mechanized destruction. To my horror, mechanized destruction followed.
I think we're at a point in our history where it isn't just about one issue, it's about where do we go with our taking care of the earth.
This is a great day for California, and especially San Diego and Imperial County. Renewable energy starting to find its way into our state, into our counties.
So when you said when they built the solar plants here, they're taking away your culture. I mean,
they're not taking it away, they're destroying it.
I think it's the headphones, correct?
I'm sorry, what? Okay. Well, I don't understand what's going on. But
I think I know I'm sorry. I think I know what's happening. If you unshare the video and then go to reshare it, and right before you reshare it, you tick a little box in the bottom left-hand side that says share video sound. And I think you'll be good to go.
Okay, I didn't understand any of that, and I don't know how to do it.
I'll do it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat. So I'll do it at the beginning. All right. Hey. Here it is. No, it's not. Here it is. No, it's not. Here it is. I'm just making everyone wait, breathless with anticipation.
That's nice.
Oh, where did it go? Here it is. Vimeo. Select all. Whoa.
There are 3 links I put in there, 2 articles and 1 video, and
I'm going to share my screen.
Awesome.
And here is the Vimeo, optimized for video clip and share sound. And you should be seeing.
Flocks of snowbirds came to Southern California by train.
You felt the tremendous space all around you.
The oasis can be seen as an isolated refuge.
Money comes from the snake's blood, and the snake's blood is powerful.
What's 30% of $2 billion?
To the extent that we're doing large-scale renewable projects in the desert, that's also causing some significant harm.
I see miles and miles of a gold mine.
What do you think the Native American people feel about this? I don't know, sir.
Call your senators, call your governors.
You've really done in the entire ecosystem at that scale.
I had first been brought to the desert by my father and mother, members of the greatest generation, attempting to heal from the horror of mechanized destruction. But to my horror, mechanized destruction followed.
I think we're at a point in our history where it isn't just about one issue, it's about where do we go with our taking care of the earth.
This is a great day for California, and especially San Diego and Imperial counties. Renewable energy starting to find its way into our state and into our counties.
So when you said when they build the solar plants here, they're taking away your culture. I mean, do you see this?
They're not taking it away, they're destroying it.
Okay, well, that should give you a clue. What is the story about? Greenwash. So I went to my home desert. I wanted to make a film about renewable energy. I wanted to understand how the agencies involved, like the Department of Interior, was understanding the needs of stakeholders. And I wanted to get a glimpse of this big, bright future of renewable energy that was laid out before us. Well, what happened was that there was an incredible amount of investment through Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs to power up these giant power tower structures, which are also known as concentrating solar, that have thousands of mirrors around a large tower, and they focus the sun's energy up into molten salt, actually, that heats the salt and thus turns into a giant water heater. The problem was that all of this was new and a beginning of renewable energy that was not thoroughly tested with technologies that were never used before. And what happened was that it failed. And it failed miserably because it was a reliance on technology and not on traditional means of generating power or even wise and efficient uses of generating power. And what happened was that these large solar facilities had to be facilitated by 50% fossil fuels in the form of natural gas. So while the state of California was sold a large green project that at billions of dollars each, times maybe a 200 in the planning stages at one point, the entire concept didn't work, and it provided an opening for the fossil fuel industry to gain a foothold in the deserts of California by creating natural gas-fired power plants that wouldn't have been able to get permitted or even exist. So I began to write this story about my movie just on patreon.com to try to give a backstory of 3 of the films that I produced. And I did this at the same time that COP26 was beginning. And I remembered the story and how disappointed I was that, that this had turned into a scam and a fraud. And I use that word in all seriousness because it was a fraud to investors, a fraud to the population of California, and a fraud to people who want to be concerned about green energy solutions. So what I found in reviewing the COP26 dialogue was that Greenpeace has an investigative arm, and it's called Unearthed. And Unearthed turned over documentation, secret documentation from the government of Australia regarding their COP26 2050 goals according to the IPCC requirements. And there was, upon further study, it was determined that while Australia may have decided that they would like to meet 2050 goals for coal production, they're the number 5 coal producer in the world, there was no means for getting there. There was no verifiable plan for getting there. So what I found from reviewing my experience in Southern California with the greenwash of technologies that were not ready for prime time, we also saw at COP26 a greenwash by the coal industry refusing to live up to or commit to or validate or verify their goals. So fast forward, something happened, and it was on about day 4 or 5, and Al Gore took the stage at COP26 and introduced a program called Climate Trace. Climate Trace utilizes existing satellite data and sensor data connected to the World Wide Web to monitor these GHG emitting assets, as we call them, around the world, so that there can be some verification of emissions from GHG producing plants like the one in California and like the coal-fired plants in Australia and so forth. And it's called The Value of What's Not There, actually, the article, because what we're finding is the negative valuation of GHGs is so high that you could run a whole economy based on essentially negative finances, negative values. And what causes a penalty is worth more when it's removed, and so forth. And this is a concept that was introduced by Amory Lovins many, many years ago in terms of energy, called negawatts. And so if you look up negawatts in Wikipedia, you'll find quite a lot on this concept. But as I reviewed what was going on at COP26, I was very disappointed to see essentially what I saw before, which is a lot of the blocking of the goals and the solutions by the entrenched industries, And I was sorry to see this, and I wanted to bring it up to you all. And also the climate trace technologies to monitor, validate, and verify, so that it's not so easy for corporations or states to skate around the climate goals and engage in greenwash. So thank you, Al Gore. Thank you to Climate Trace. You've given us something, and I hope it works.
So something good came out of the COP26, I guess, huh?
Yes, I was looking for it. I was scavenging the news.
Oh, you're awesome, Robert, because I went in very pessimistic. So, well, that's kind of a good way to end the evening. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to Laisa, Amy, Natalie, Dr. Pavlovskaya, Enrique for putting this together. It was all him. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, I will answer them. And if I don't have the correct answer, I'll give you an answer nonetheless. Okay. Otherwise, please have a good night. Stay safe. Thank you for your enthusiasm, your hard work, for caring about our little blue planet. And Christina is smarter than her sister Joanna. I just want to put that out there. Okay. Wow. All right. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Okay. So please, thank you guys. Please join our mailing list and just get in touch with us. We'll be doing a beach cleanup early next year, maybe even 2. Maybe even more. So as soon as this COVID thing dies down, we have a lot of projects in the works. We're going to send about 50 students to intern in Oaxaca to help reforest. That's a lie, but
no. Now you need to do it, okay?
Yes. Oh man. Okay, I'll go, and I'll bring some tequila. Okay. Yes, this is great. So reforestation, climate tracing, a lot of things were learned today. And I know everything already. So, I mean, I learned a lot. So I hope everyone had a good time. And please stay safe out there. Keep your masks on. Get your vaccines. Take care, everyone. And for those of you who are my students, the write-up is up on thing there. Okay, take care, everyone.
Thank you
all. Stay out
all.
of trouble.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.